We're looking at chapter 9 of our text, which deals with dynamics of interpersonal relationships. And so far we've looked at why we form relationships, and now we move on to models of relational dynamics. So all relationships are going to vary and change over time. Communication scholars have attempted to describe and explain how communication as a concept creates and reflects the changing dynamics in interpersonal relationships. So let's look at the stages of relational development. And they're basically three. It's the waxing part. It's kind of like a staircase in some ways. So the waxing meaning that it's growing in levels of intimacy. And then it reaches a plateau. And that plateau may be a place where it's maintained. And then the other part, the third part of it, is the waning part of a relationship. And there are various permutations of that. So not all relationships dissolve eventually. Some stay at the plateau and they continue. They may go up and down. Certainly relationships do that. They do wax and wane over time and reach different plateau levels. And so it's not as simplistic as one thinks it is. The textbook has a nice figure 9.1, that shows the different levels going up, and that's initiating, experimenting, intensifying, integrating, bonding. It's kind of a place where there's a plateau, and then differentiating, subscribing, stagnating, avoiding, and finally terminating. So there's the coming together, there's the relational maintenance area as it plateaus, and there's a coming apart. Okay, let's look in detail now at the very first stage, and that is the initiating stage. The initiating stage, your goal in this stage is to show that you are interested in making contact and to demonstrate that you're a person worth talking to. So the initial behavior may be handshakes and hellos and talk about the weather. It may seem superficial and meaningless, but it is a way of signaling that you are interested in building some kind of relationship with the other person. Initiating relationships, especially romantic ones, can be particularly difficult for individuals who are shy and introverted. Again, keep in mind that initiating is the opening stage for all types of relationships, not just romantic ones. Friendships, relationships at work, between employees, between colleagues, it all starts at the same place. The second level is experimenting. So after you make contact with a new person that you're interested in, we engage in a stage called experimenting. This is where we search for common ground. So we ask them questions like, where are you from? What's your major? What are some of your hobbies? We look for similarities to decide whether we want to pursue this relationship. Again, the hallmark of experimenting is some small talk. And the reason we tolerate the ordeal of small talk is because it serves several functions. It's a useful way to find out what interests we share in common with the other person. We kind of audition the other person to help us decide whether a relationship is worth pursuing. And it's also a safe way. We don't provide intimate information disclosure about ourselves, so it's a safe way to ease into a relationship. You haven't risked much as you decide whether to proceed or not to proceed in this relationship. Sometimes you can find out quite a bit of information by perusing that person's social networking file. That may be a way. You might get enough information, you might get too much information. Photos and mutual friends are important factors in deciding whether to continue developing a relationship. And of course, gathering this information online is less face-threatening. It doesn't involve any stammering or blushing or awkward pauses. But sometimes the relationship that seems so promising in virtual reality, and that is online, may become less so when interacting face to face. Communication researchers call this shift in communication channels modality switching, and certainly comes with a variety of channels. Okay, the next stage is intensifying. In this stage, communicators increase the amount of contact and the breadth and depth of the information they share, and that is the amount of self-disclosure. It involves spending more time together, participating in shared activities, hanging out with mutual friends, or even taking some trips together. Very often, these individuals may use less direct methods of communication, maybe as a way to save face or to protect their face. So they may do favors for the partner. They may give tokens of affection. They may hint and flirt. They may express feelings non-verbally. They may want to get to know the partner's family and friends. And they do this instead of the traditional saying, I love you. And so these ways are less threatening than saying, I love you at this point for romantic relationships. The intensifying stage is usually a time of relational excitement and even euphoria. Often it doesn't last too long. It moves on to the next stage, and that is the integrating stage. The individuals entering this stage begin to take on an identity as a social unit. So the two, in some sense, are viewed as one. Their social circles might merge. They might share each other's commitments. They might talk about going here for Thanksgiving. They may designate common property like their apartment, their car, their song. So they'll do a lot of things that will create and reinforce their identity as a couple. That is eating together at a favorite restaurant, expressing physical affection, worshiping together. So it's at this point in time, we give up some characteristics of our former selves and we become somewhat enmeshed with the other person. We give up some autonomy, some individuality. We may go online as Facebook official, declaring publicly that we are a couple and we are in a relationship. The next stage is bonding. During this stage, partners make symbolic public gestures to show the world that their relationship exists and the commitment has been established. So relationships don't have to be romantic to achieve bonding. Sometimes it's a relationship to write a book, or a student being initiated into a sorority, or two males or two females entering a friendship. So bonding usually marks an important turning point in relationships. Up to now, the relationship may have developed at a steady pace. Now it moves in an accelerated pace. It's very possible at this point that the relationship has plateaued and it begins now to wane. It has waxed, moving up. Now it starts to move down. So differentiating. So at this point, partners find themselves needing to reestablish their individual identities. This is called differentiating. It's an important differentiation. Can be positive, considering that people need to be individuals as well as a part of a relationship, and it might be at this point the part of differentiating is a healthy part of maintaining the relationship, realizing that they need space. The key to successful differentiation is maintaining commitment to a relationship while also creating the space for being individuals. If that is not the case, then they are differentiating for the purpose of, because this relationship is waning, it will lead to the next phase, and that is circumscribing. Partners reduce the scope of their contact with each other. So now the distinctions that were there initially in the differentiating stage become more clearly marked and labeled. It's my friends and your friends, my bank account, your bank account. They may be markers of a healthy balance, but very often they are clearly about separation and that this relationship is waning. Stagnating occurs next as the relationship, as circumscribing continues, the relationship begins to stagnate. They behave toward each other in old familiar ways without much feeling. No growth occurs. Relational boredom sets in at this point, and the relationship is a shell of its former self. Relationships may remain in the stagnating stage for many years, but it may move to the next level, and that is avoiding. When stagnation becomes too unpleasant, people in a relationship begin to create distance by avoiding each other. They do it under the disguise of excuses as to why they don't see each other. Some relationships stall out at this point. They just drift apart. Not all relationships end, and that's the next stage, the terminating stage. Partnerships, friendships, and marriages can last for a lifetime, but many relationships do end. They do deteriorate to such a stage where they terminate the relationship. Characteristics of this stage, the terminating stage, include summary dialogues of where the relationship has gone and the desire to disassociate. Some people terminate the relationship through the use of technology. One survey of 1,000 people found that 45% had used their mobile device to end a relationship, usually by text. It may not be the best way. It all depends on how the other person might respond. And you certainly do learn some things about yourself even when a relationship is terminated. There's some positive lessons that might help in future relationships. And these fall into 4 categories. Person positives, such as you individually gaining self-confidence and recognizing that it's all right to cry. Other positives, such as learning more about what is desired in a partner. Relational positives, such as how to communicate better and how not to jump in a relationship too quickly. Environment positives, such as learning to rely more on friends and how to better balance relationships and schoolwork. And at the end of the day, it's not as much about gaining closure, even though that's fine. It's more about finding meaning in that relationship and how you've grown as a person. In the next video section, we're going to look at dialectical tensions.